Well, greetings, students. Good to have you here for our first class. This is Dr. Jim Mitroka, and today we're going to kick off our healthy lifestyle class with a little bit of introductory material. So I always like to start out with is kind of the big picture, the perspective of why we would even be interested in developing healthy lifestyles. And a good place to start is with this verse from 1 Corinthians. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own, you were bought for a price. Therefore, honor God with your body. And I want to really try to keep this perspective, that the objective, really what we are all about, is honoring God with our body. One might make the argument that, hey, I could take care of myself and then tomorrow get hit by a bus. So what good did all the sacrifice do? Well, it did the good in that by taking care of yourself, you show others and you show the Lord that you honor the very special creation that He put together, which is you yourself. Well, let's consider where we're coming from. The health focus, in the U.S. at least, has pretty much been on disease treatment. Okay, and the methods of doing that has been to use drugs and surgery to remediate disease. However, elsewhere in the world, and to some extent, growing in the U.S., is a trend towards a focus on prevention. And that's going to be our primary emphasis. All right, so what I want to discuss for a moment is the oftentimes argument that people make that there really is no point in taking care of themselves because, after all, we all know that that your health is not determined by your lifestyle, but more by genetics. So what I'm showing here are two individuals that have different genetic, let's say, potential in terms of the quality and the duration of their life. We have Joe, and then we have Mary. Okay, and you can see that Joe has a huge potential for the duration of his life. Now, the thing is, Joe, in this case, lives, let's say, a poor lifestyle. Okay, whereas Mary has an excellent lifestyle. All right. Well, what happens as a consequence of that is that Joe will end up having a shorter life and presumably a lower quality life than Mary, simply because the actual realized, lived out part of their life is greater for Mary than it is for Joe. So I know it's a little bit of a corny diagram, but I think to a large extent life really is reflected by this diagram. The Lord gives us each a different hand of cards, so to speak, but our responsibility is to play out the hand that we're given to the best of our ability. Here's another representation of the impact of lifestyle on health. And here you see what I'm looking at is cardiovascular or respiratory function. Okay, this axis is the quality of a person's cardiac or respiratory function versus their adult age. And these ages of 20 to 80 are only approximations, just meant to give you an relative idea where we are on this age scale. But if we look at a person who, let's say, is living an unhealthy lifestyle, and that's in blue, you see that their function, and you have to understand this is just a stylized representation. It's not exactly the way things actually work, but to some extent it's a pretty good approximation. Their function begins to go down early in their adult years, and it goes down little by little by little in an almost continuous way. Okay, And what happens is that they reach a point where your minimum your cardiovascular and respiratory function are so low that they're about at the minimum you'd need for activities of daily living. So once you get to that point, you're really having a hard time just basically taking care of yourself, let's say. And you may survive for a long time until you actually, let's say, die here at this point. But you're not living a very high quality of life. Now that we're going to compare to a person living a healthy lifestyle. That person more or less maintains their cardiovascular and respiratory function out quite a way well into their adult age, and then it begins to gradually fall, and boom, you reach a point where the whole thing just falls apart. Now, comparing these two curves is important because one thing I want to show you is that living a healthy lifestyle may give you a few extra years of life, but not many. And quite often people will make the argument that it's not worth living a healthy lifestyle just to gain a few years. But the important consideration is not just the years of life, but the years of active life. There you see that the person who had the unhealthy lifestyle, because their cardiovascular and respiratory function is being eroded really in a sense without them even knowing it, unless they push themselves, they end up at this minimum level really early, even in their actual lifespan, whereas a person who lives a healthy lifestyle is pretty much able to take care of themselves pretty much to the end. So this idea I think is really very useful, and this comes I'll look it up from Kenneth Cooper, the father of aerobics. I really like that concept. Now let's look at some actual factors that are involved in living a healthy lifestyle. And this information here is from the so-called Potsdam study, which you will have in your notes to look at as the actual publication of that file, some of the findings of that study, and they broke it out into 4 factors, which in that Potsdam study they claim constitute a healthy lifestyle. One is not smoking, having a BMI less than 30, exercising more than 3.5 days a week, and having what they term a healthy diet. So these are the 4 factors that were included in this Potsdam study. And what they found is very interesting, is they found that overall they claim about 80% roughly of the diseases of aging or the chronic diseases of life, roughly 80% can be reduced or eliminated by having all 4 factors optimized in terms of a healthy lifestyle. So if we look, for example, at diabetes, we could see people who had all 4 lifestyle components under control had, must be about maybe 5-10% the relative risk of a person who didn't have these factors under control, very low. Whereas somebody who had the incidence of myocardial infarction was reduced tremendously, again, by having all 4 healthy lifestyles. And the paper details which lifestyle had the most impact on each of these disease states. Stroke, you can see there is a difference, but there's quite a bit of a variation. And cancer, interestingly enough, even though the lifestyle modification there's no question that having all 4 factors under control reduced the cancer incidence, you can see it's not as great as the effect of diabetes. So obviously it's interesting that the impact of lifestyle on longevity and health overall is significant, but it's not the same for each disease state. Some disease states like cancer, the impact is less, whereas diabetes, the impact is greater. Okay, if I had to pick Well, we're going to stick with the number they picked. They said that roughly 80% of diseases, of chronic diseases, can be ameliorated or prevented by proper lifestyle modification. Now, in our class, I put these two slides up, or I put these two tables side by side, the Potsdam study versus our class, just for sake of comparison. Okay, and again, in the Potsdam study, they looked at the smoking, BMI, exercise, and diet. Well, we're kind of looking at very similar things. We're going to look at substance abuse, which includes certainly smoking, and then we're going to look at exercise again. We're going to definitely look at exercise. We're going to look at diet, but interestingly enough, I'm not going to look at BMI per se, which they did in the Potsdam study, because I would say BMI is not really a lifestyle. It is a consequence of a lifestyle. So if someone has their exercise and diet under control, BMI will automatically take care of itself. So then for us, the fourth factor I want to talk about is getting the proper amount of rest and reducing stress. So those are the components that we'll be looking at as we move forward with our study. So then the problem really boils down to the simple question of how do we actually begin to implement a healthy lifestyle. And in order to reduce the incidence and severity of disease and promote a healthy lifestyle, good health, we need the following things. First of all, you have to have the knowledge. You have to know what factors matter and what factors don't. You'll often hear people say, oh, I'm going to stay away from everything because everything is poisonous. Not really. As you know, being professionals in the area, the dose makes the poison, meaning that some things are poison at a very low dose, some things are poison at a very high dose. So we have to be able to understand and discriminate between majors and minors when it comes to what has an impact on our health from a positive and negative point of view. And secondly, we have to value good health. We have to have value in ourselves. And for those of us who are believers, we value ourselves because we know that we're created in the image of the Lord, and that we have intrinsic value. So we have to have values of ourself. We have to have a good self-image, and also to be able to see down the line how our health can have a positive impact on others. And then, of course, lastly, we have to put these things together. We have to be what Covey would call proactive and make our actions really align between what we know and what we value. So I'm calling it the challenge here is using our knowledge to overcome an impulse with a value. That, I think, to a large extent is the crux of living a healthy lifestyle. Sometimes it's difficult, but our values say we should do it. And we're going to be talking about ways of living out a healthy lifestyle that aren't so difficult, that are really quite enjoyable. That's kind of a common misconception that I hope we can overcome during this class. And so that's it for this week, students. Looking forward to seeing you next week. I'm sure you have some good thoughts on this matter, just as introductory material, and I hope to see that in our threaded discussion section. God bless. Take care.